Hey guys, today we're talking about operant conditioning. It takes classical conditioning a step further because now there is going to be some sort of thought process involved with whether or not a behavior is repeated. Um, Learning is not passive in this case. Instead, it's based on rewards or punishments. It's based on a pleasant stimulus or a not so pleasant stimulus, and how the organism in question reacts to that stimulus will determine whether or not they are going to repeat the behavior. So there's two big names before we really get started in operant conditioning that you need to be familiar with. Edward Thorndike, who studied his law of effect. Law of effect meaning that, there's some sort of cause and effect with learning. That reward is going to strengthen a behavior. So he studied his law of effect by putting these cats into puzzle boxes and figured out pretty quickly that when there was a treat for the cat at the end, when there was food at the end, the cat was going to figure out very quickly how to get out of that puzzle box so that they can get the treat. Similarly, the biggest name in behaviorism comes up here with operant conditioning, and that's B.F. Skinner. He built operant chambers to look at different behaviors he used both pigeons and rats to see if they would perform different tasks for rewards, which were mostly food, always food. So he's the leading figure in the behaviorism movement, and he's really the leading researcher in operant conditioning. All right, so let's get into it. Okay, so like I said, with operant conditioning, the learner is not passive. It's based on some sort of consequence. Those consequences are going to be different types of stimuli. We have appetitive or a pleasant stimuli. This is something that you want to receive. So like with training a dog, it could be like a cookie or, a little kid wanting to get a sticker for good behavior in class. Aversive or unpleasant stimuli is something that you want to avoid or escape from. Getting a ticket for speeding or getting a shock for not doing a behavior properly. So first we have to talk about reinforcement. Reinforcement is going to be anything that causes a behavior to repeat. Think reinforcement, repeat of behavior, okay? Positive reinforcements, now here comes my soapbox about positive versus negative. Positive and negative are not going to mean good and bad. Do not let yourself get tripped up on that again. Positive and negative are just going to mean we're either adding something or we're taking something away. Reinforcement means we're always going to repeat the behavior. So a positive reinforcement, something is given, something that's wanted, is given to whoever is doing the behavior to repeat the behavior. Okay, a negative reinforcement, something is taken away. So something unpleasant is taken away. In this case, we have, a little boy is given ice cream or candy for his good behavior, so he's going to repeat that behavior. And in this other picture, the thing that's being taken away from this sweaty man is the heat. So he's going to turn on the fan. That's the behavior, is turning on the fan every time he wants to get rid of the heat. Okay, so positive reinforcement, we're adding something pleasant. Negative reinforcement, we're taking something unpleasant away. We also have primary and secondary reinforcers. Primary reinforcers are things that are going to be good on their own. Usually food is a common primary reinforcer. Usually a lot of times in the experiments within this unit, they use food. These are things that are on their own, good and rewarding. Secondary reinforcers are things that we learned have value. This is because they're associated with being able to purchase a secondary, or a primary rather, reinforcer. So money, you can use money to purchase donuts. Applause, attention. Those, for some people, may be a primary reinforcer because they're intrinsically rewarding, but if you think about like a comedian or something like that, the more applause or the more videos, the more likes that they get on YouTube or Facebook or whatever, the more likes that they get, the more successful they become, therefore the more money they make, therefore they can buy more stuff. Okay, money is a generalized secondary reinforcer. It can be traded for pretty much anything. You can't buy happiness, but it's harder to cry in a Ferrari. This also leads into the idea of a token economy. So every time a good behavior is performed, a token is given. This is used a lot of the times in homes, prisons, schools, mental institutions, right? Some of you growing up may have had like a behavior chart in your classroom where you get a certain number of stars, or if the class gets a certain number of stars, they get a prize. So token economy, anytime you see anything with that, it has to deal with secondary reinforcers. Okay, you're trading the 10 stars in for a pizza party or whatever. Okay, so again, negative reinforcement is not punishment. Punishment is something else. Reinforcement repeats the behavior. Punishment pauses or stops the behavior. So remember, reinforcement, repeat, punishment, pause, or stop the behavior. So let's look at some examples and figure out if they are positively or negatively reinforced. A lot of these sometimes are going to depend on the wording of the question, so you really, really have to be paying attention. You need to ask yourselves two things. One, is something being added or taken away? And two, is this behavior going to repeat? Now, these are all examples of reinforcement, so the behavior is always going to repeat, so we know right off the bat it's being reinforced, so is something being added or taken away? Okay, so when we put on our seatbelt, what are we really doing? Well, we're putting on our seatbelt to avoid injury, or we're putting on our seatbelt to avoid a ticket, or we're putting on a seatbelt to stop that beeping noise in our car. So the action of putting on your seatbelt is actually going to be a negative reinforcer. Now, remember what I said about negative not meaning bad? That's exactly this situation. The thing we're taking away an unpleasant stimulus, either the ticket or the beeping noise, or the threat of being thrown through your windshield. But putting on your seatbelt is a good thing. Okay, so you're always going to do that to avoid those things. Here's another one. This couple here, he receives a smooch for doing the dishes, so that's going to be a positive reinforcement. The husband in this situation wants the smooch, so he's going to do the dishes again. Okay, she's faking sick to avoid a class. So the class, obviously if she's avoiding the class is going to be the negative thing. So the class is the thing that's taken away. We're taking away the unpleasant thing. And anytime she doesn't want to go to class, she's going to fake sick. This one's tricky, taking an aspirin. Okay, so what do you do when you take an aspirin? You get rid of a headache. So this one is another one that's a negative reinforcement. Again, it's not necessarily a bad thing because you feel better, but every time you have a headache, you're going to take the aspirin, the behavior, to get rid of the headache, the unpleasant stimulus. Okay, studying for a test, this one could go either way, so this is where wording is important. If you're studying for a test to avoid a failing grade, the failing grade is the negative stimulus, okay, or the unpleasant stimulus, rather, not negative, it's going to be negatively reinforced because you're taking away the unpleasant stimulus. If you're studying for a good grade, it's going to be positively reinforced. So you really, really have to be careful when looking at examples of this. Either in both cases, the behavior is repeated. The person studies for the grade. It's just what are they studying for? Is it to avoid the bad grade, or is it to, get a good grade? Same thing with this example here. Someone breaks out of jail. Well, if they're breaking out of jail to gain freedom, freedom would be the pleasant stimulus, so it would be positively reinforced. If they are breaking out of jail to avoid, the confinement of jail, then it would be negatively reinforced. Again, both cases, the behavior is repeated, but you have to be really, really careful. You have to look very, very carefully at what the stimulus actually is. Okay, next up we have punishment. Punishment, if reinforcement repeats the behavior, punishment, like I already said, pauses the behavior. It stops the behavior. So positive punishment, again, not necessarily good negative punishment, not necessarily bad. With positive punishment, we add something unpleasant. Okay, a shock, a spank, something that tastes gross. Negative punishment, you take away something that is pleasant. You get grounded, so your parents positively punish you by giving you a spanking, or they negatively punish you by taking away your car keys. Okay, punishment works best immediately after the behavior and is harsh, but you have to really, really be careful with punishment. There's a lot of studies done, both in raising kids and stuff like that, and in psychology, saying that punishment sometimes doesn't work and can backfire. Okay, so last thing we need to look at is this chart here, and I'm going to give you some examples while you read it over. Okay, so we're going to take an example of something that we have all seen and all experienced. That is a little kid acting out in the grocery store. So a little kid is acting out in the grocery store, and mom, in order to quiet down the little kid, positively reinforces the behavior. Okay, so we're giving something good that by giving a lollipop. So what's the kid going to do in the store? Freak out. The mom then says, okay, well, if you're not going to stop screaming, I'm going to positively punish you by giving you a smack. Okay, so the mom spanks the kid in the grocery store and the kid continues to freak out. Mom then negatively punishes the kid by saying, that's it, when you get home, you're grounded, I'm taking away your toys, you're not going to have playtime or whatever. So they're taking away something that they want for the likelihood of the behavior to stop. And then finally, the mom negatively reinforces the behavior as now the kid is screaming, crying, and carrying on because they're losing all their toys and they got spanked and they're not getting another lollipop. And they are going to be negatively reinforced when mom finally takes the kid out of the grocery store, because at that point the kid has learned freaking out gets me out of the grocery store, so I'm always going to freak out in the grocery store. I know this stuff can be a little bit confusing, so if you have any questions, let me know. Work through some examples. You can always look up some other examples online, and hopefully you guys have it. I'll talk to you tomorrow.